On this episode of Common Filth Radio, being on the wrong side of history, masculinity, abortion, an analysis of the movie Nightcrawler, and a whole lot more. Thank you very much for listening. If you would like to support the show, click on the Amazon referral link that is located in the description below this video. You click on that link, it'll take you to the Amazon front page, search for your desired products, add to your cart, check out, and I get a percentage of your total purchase with no additional cost to you. I would like to read you a quote from Werner Herzog, a German director. He says, "The best advice I can offer to those heading into the world of film is to not wait for the system to finance your projects and for others to decide your fate. If you can't afford to make a $1 million film, raise $10,000 and produce it yourself. That's all you need to make a feature film these days. Beware of useless bottom-rung secretarial jobs in the film production companies. Instead, so long as you are able-bodied, head out to where the real world is. Roll up your sleeves and work as a bouncer in a sex club, or a warden in a lunatic asylum, or a machine operator in a slaughterhouse. Drive a taxi for 6 months, and you'll have enough money to make a film. Walk on foot, learn languages, and a craft or trade that has nothing to do with cinema. Filmmaking, like great literature, must have experience of life at its foundation." This is one of the most eloquent, accurate statements regarding the creation of art that I've ever come across. And you can relate this to the problems with film criticism, because professional film critics are not people who have had many genuine life experiences. And I'm not counting college, because college is just another artificial environment that we entertain ourselves with. These people are professional bullshitters who want to fool you into believing that they have some sort of authority to judge what is good and what isn't. And they have no way of doing that on a moral level. So that's why a lot of critics primarily focus on the technical aspects of what is put in front of them, rather than the spiritual or interpersonal aspects. So they focus on the structure of the narrative, the performances of the actors, how the film looks on screen. This is not to say that these are not important parts of what goes into a movie. But if that's all there is, there really isn't much to the movie. If you aren't relating it to the fabric of reality, then it's not good art. The reason I believe that people focus so heavily on the technical aspects of films and filmmaking is because most Hollywood films really lack that human element. And if they do have that human element, that element of reality, it's tacked on in a very hokey, obvious, sentimentalist kind of way. So imagine my surprise when I saw Nightcrawler last week, a movie that can relate to reality in some meaningful way. It's a movie that can only be made in America and be inspired by America. America is a spiritual and genetic toilet where nothing thrives, nothing grows other than the worst kind of filth you can imagine. America is a spiritually dead, rootless, consumerist society. Consumerism is just a kinder word for economic pornography. But we'll go with that word. The characters in Nightcrawler are defined by these traits. None of the main characters in the movie have families, either one that they can go home to or one of their own. Most of the characters benefit from the tensions of living in a multicultural sewer like Los Angeles. The main character finds work after being a thief as what they call a nightcrawler, somebody who collects video footage of car wrecks, crimes, etc., for purpose of selling them to TV stations for airing on the nightly news. The lead actress in the film, her character says that we want stories about urban crime, minorities going into white affluent neighborhoods and causing trouble. That's what gets the ratings. They're exploiting on the tensions inherent in putting competing groups in close proximity. I'm surprised that the movie hasn't been decried as racist by Slate and Jezebel. Yeah, Jezebel would have a lot of issues with this movie, but I'll get to that later. But the movie has no issues about showing the criminals as blacks and Mexicans. And what will scare the ethically retarded affluent whites that live in these gated communities more than some feral youths breaching the perimeter? And I say the ethically retarded because only the ethically retarded would get their information from the nightly news. So the news station in the movie and the news director lady in the movie decide to prey on these people's fears that wouldn't exist in a homogenous society. A homogenous society, a homogenous culture, would encourage safety. You'd know your neighbors better, you'd have some incentive to look after one another, and you wouldn't have the means to live by yourself. When you have no root, when you live alone, you live in a culture which takes no interest in you other than what you can provide for it economically. You tend to feel very insecure. And uncomfortable people, insecure people, tend to place their comfort in material things. Advertisers like that very much. So, with this being established, niches get formed. And the niche in this movie, like I described, is collecting video footage of bad things that happen at night and selling them to local news affiliates. Only in America, only in a rootless, materially driven, amoral society are these things possible. The worst thing I have to say about the movie is that in its duration, while you're watching it, you actually enjoy all the filth that makes this particular situation you're looking into possible. I read a review out of curiosity for this movie before I saw it. It said that, oh, this is a commentary on the job market, but even if the economy were good, if the labor market were favorable to the worker, this movie would still be possible because unless you're working in the financial industry or the healthcare industry, your job is probably going to involve doing a lot of dehumanizing, stupid nonsense. Think about how many door-to-door salesmen you've tried to politely shoo away. Think about how many telemarketers you've hung up on. And think about what they're doing from their perspective. You're just one of many. You're one little piece on the big pile of shit that is their day, their week, their month, their year, their life. America is great at producing crazy people. Crazy, crazy, crazy. The craziest people you could possibly imagine. And I imagine that a lot of that is due to the kind of circumstances we create here, where everything has to be sold. Nobody gives a shit about you. You have to smooth talk your way into somebody's wallet. And if you find that charming your way through life, bullshitting your way through life is not a way to go, and you take up a trade or something like that, something honest, you're considered to be not reaching your potential, or people think you're some sort of piece of shit. Americans only care about money and not knowledge, experience, insight, etc., because there is nothing to the culture that reminds them that they are finite creatures and that there are things bigger than themselves. America doesn't have great cathedrals. America doesn't have any ancient places of historical significance. There are no grand tributes to God. There is only tributes to corruption. Go to Washington, D.C. Lincoln Monument, Washington Monument, the White House. All very corrupt things. But before I forget, I did mention that the feminist set wouldn't like Nightcrawler because the lady in the movie who collects all the news for her network is not very good at her job. She's basically wasted her life on a career that she's not very good at. And the movie acknowledges this. Why do you people think that having a job or having some degree of corporate influence is the greatest thing you could do? The corporation doesn't give a shit about you. As soon as you're costing it more money than you're making it, you're done. And that day will come, no matter how good you are. These are people that think being on the board of directors of some company is a more noble thing than having a positive influence on the life of your spouse or your children, your brothers or sisters, your cousins. And the same goes for political power. Everyone will remember who Great Grandma was. But can you remember who the state senator of Florida was in 1952? If you can, you're probably autistic and you could probably win a lot of money on Jeopardy. So go chase that money. Go be an intern for some shitty congressman. Yeah, that'll get you far. That's a lot more fulfilling than being fondly remembered by your loved ones. But enough of that. Let's get into your questions. This one's from Vincent. First question is, imagine you are forced to talk to a 14-year-old transsexual bisexual from Sweden. How would you handle the situation and what would you say? Second question, you are in a heated argument with someone about something and it could easily escalate into a physical fight. Would you allow it to escalate into a fight or talk your way out of it? What are your feelings on people who choose the latter? To the first question, I'd say you are 14. You have no idea what you're doing, and you shouldn't define your life based on what you think is right when you are 14 years old. I can't remember what I thought was important when I was 14 years old, but it wasn't anything that would have gotten me anywhere. What this hypothetical Swedish transsexual bisexual is doing is talking instead of listening. When you're 14, you should be listening to the things around you. You should be paying attention to the little subtle social cues that people are doing, how people interact with one another, in order to figure out how to be a decent human being rather than, oh, I'm going to be this, and this is who I really am, Mom. This is not a phase. Unfortunately, a lot of people have this notion that you should let your kid express themselves, when a kid has nothing worth expressing. At least not when you're 14. Unfortunately, in places like Sweden and to a slightly lesser extent the United States, we encourage these kids, oh, be who you are. Who you are at 14 should not define whatever else comes after it. And there's going to be a hell of a lot that comes after the age of 14. But instead of like sane adults, we approach these things with this wide-eyed, accepting view. Oh, they're being who they are because it's accepting and it's great because they're correcting historical injustices. They're correcting historical oppressions. The oppression is coming from inside your head, like so many things are. 14-year-olds need to be oppressed because they have no idea of anything. I did mention at the beginning of the episode being on the wrong side of history, and I mentioned historical oppression, and I think that would be a good way to talk about this. How people think that they are somehow historical figures, that their names will be written in the history books. Do you think the graves of the Confederate soldiers, these people who were loved ones to somebody, do you think their graves will say, here lies so-and-so, died in battle, he was on the wrong side of history? Future epitaphs might read that. Burials 50 years from now, white people might say that because the race will be so mongrelized that they'll have no other choice. The fact that people say you're on the wrong side of history, we're on the right side of history, so-and-so is correcting historical injustices, is proof that people are so far up their own asses, I doubt that they can ever be extracted. When blacks misbehave, the idiot whites will say, oh, they're just correcting historical wrongs. Well, if they're correcting slavery, the first owner in The first slave owner in America was a black man. If you're saying that, oh, they're correcting the historical injustice of Jim Crow, why do you think there are Chinatowns? Do you think that these places exist to enrich you? To make you feel diverse? Also, I don't think Japanese people in America are a problem, even though they've been interned hell of a lot more recently than blacks have been enslaved. These folks don't really care about intellectual honesty. They're scratching the itch of guilt they feel, false guilt, intellectually dishonest guilt. If we want to talk about correcting historical injustices, why don't we give the land to the descendants of the indentured servants, the land they were promised and never received? We don't want to hear about that, though, because, well, that involves white people. Does it not occur to these people who use the wrong side of history line that every group has been cruel, unkind, uncaring to themselves and to other groups? No one wants to acknowledge the fact that people, by and large, are not good to each other. And that will never change. No one wants to acknowledge this because it doesn't fit some preconceived narrative concocted in some pervert professor's office. That was quite the detour, wasn't it? There is still another part of this question, which I will read again. You are in a heated argument with someone about something and it could easily escalate into a physical fight. Would you allow it to escalate into a fight or talk your way out of it? What are your feelings on people who choose the latter? I would avoid it. This is pretty simple. If they throw the first punch, you fight back. Just for the sake of your reputation, because the cops are going to get called. They're going to ask you questions, and you don't want to say, oh, you want to have witnesses saying, oh, that guy, he swung first. It's no way to go. All right, next one from Mine 1001. Susan Greenfield is a neuroscientist, and she said for a while now that social media and the new brave world of instant communication and the rapid evolution of technology is having a detrimental effect on human development, particularly the millennial generation and the next generation. She says that Facebook and Twitter and the like are making people narcissistic and making their egos and self-esteem based on what people they have never met say about them. Do you agree? And do you think this rise in radical libertarianism is a result of that? I absolutely agree, because humans have this desire to be appreciated and acknowledged positively. And before you had Facebook and Twitter and other forms of instant validation, you would seek it from your neighbors, your coworkers, your church, your family, and any other of these physical community structures. So in order to gain validation from these communities, you would have to contribute to it positively in some way, and usually in a way that would benefit more people than just yourself. It's a producer mentality as opposed to a consumer mentality, which is what Facebook and Twitter promote. On Facebook and Twitter, you present yourself unfettered, and you gain validation through likes, comments, retweets, whatever. And if somebody replies negatively to you, you can just ignore them and just dismiss it as, oh, haters gonna hate. The human need for acceptance, validation, acknowledgement in a church, a neighborhood, and so on, there would be more checks on the negative parts of somebody's personality. It wouldn't just be all sunshine and roses and you're great, we love you, you're the best. In this kind of setting, you can't just fake putting your best foot forward. You'd actually have to work on yourself and improve yourself and rise to the standards set by your peers. Whereas in social media, you can put your best foot forward all the time. None of the negative parts of your personality are revealed. It's all very tightly controlled. And even if you do slip up and reveal it and somebody calls you out on it, you could just block them, and again, haters gonna hate, dismiss them and be ignorant about it. And that is why ultimately you're seeing a rise in radical libertarianism or libertine attitudes towards everything, because everything is oriented around the self. And ironically enough, there is no self improvement occurring because, again, there is no outside regulation on a given person's behavior. Next question from Pendrake113. In previous videos, you've touched on aspects of masculinity and qualities of a good man. Would you mind going a bit deeper into your views of what makes a good man in society, specifically behaviors and mannerisms? I ask because there are many young males who grow up in broken homes or are raised by spineless manginas and never get made into the best man that they could be. So I enjoy hearing what traditional or unconventional characteristics people attribute to a good man. Some would argue that this is not a masculine virtue, but in previous times, finding a good woman, a good virtuous woman, and providing for her, ensuring her safety and care and comfort, I think that would be a good example of a masculine virtue. To be a good father and raise your children to be the best they can possibly be would be a good example of a masculine virtue. Unfortunately, the state has incentivized females to act upon their emotional instability. The schools teach children to turn against their parents. At least the white ones, anyway. I don't need to say that these types of lesser masculine virtues, I mean lesser in the sense of they're easier to achieve, are now a very dangerous thing to pursue. So beyond the beta provider model of masculinity, we can look further into the past. We can see men in the past doing three things: exploring, creating, and conquering. Obviously, there is not much to explore physically because the world has been thoroughly explored and we know where everything is. There is a lot to create. You can create a book, a new idea, new set of ideas. You can create new tools to help do certain jobs more efficiently. You can create a new form of martial arts, anything. If you set upon a campaign and put in a significant portion of your energy, you can create something that had not previously existed. You can't conquer in the ancient sense because most of the world has sovereign governments, and if you built up a private militia, you would probably get shut down before you could get to a size that would be capable of toppling some local dictatorship or aristocracy. I only have one idea for conquering, and that is to conquer the social justice fanatics from creeping into every aspect of daily life. But whatever it is you want to explore, create, or conquer, you will find some degree of masculinity in that, if history is any indication. I have in my notes something I'd like to bring up before I forget, and this has nothing to do with the previous question, and it has nothing to do with the questions that will come after this, but I was reminded recently about that video, the woman in the Burger King uniform who was screaming at these pro-life demonstrators for using fake pictures and being liars, and abortion's great. You want us to go back to the 19th century, something like that. Maybe that's not what she said exactly, but would it surprise you if she said it off camera to one of her friends? It wouldn't surprise me, but let's assume these pictures of these abortions that these people are using are fake. If they're fake, show me what a real abortion looks like. Because I watched a few surgery videos over the weekend, and even something like an ACL surgery or a hip replacement surgery, it's quite graphic. It is not clean. It's not beautiful. It's not anything pleasant. The modern Western woman's fascination with abortion and being able to get one is proof that we are so far down this black hole of decadence that it's hard to imagine us ever escaping it. And these people think that elections have something to do with this. They'll vote for one candidate or the other because they think that they'll ban abortions, and oh my god, they're going to make it so that we're all barefoot and pregnant with husbands. Oh no, God forbid that ever happens. They so deeply care about getting a coat hanger procedure lawfully that they'll forego improving their lives, improving their neighborhoods, improving their communities, whatever, and they'll stump for this bullshit. And they'll say, the evil Republicans are closing abortion clinics. Abortion clinics are being closed because they're fucking disgusting and nobody wants to work at them. You think it's some vast right-wing conspiracy that people don't want to go to medical school to learn how to dismantle fetuses? Individuals become surgeons because they want to fix people, not destroy them. I mean, you might become a doctor to harm if your name is Kermit Gosnell. How quickly we forget about that story. If you're not familiar, he killed multiple babies after they were born in his abortion clinic. And I saw the other day on Drudge Report, not the other day, but it wasn't too long ago, that there was a headline on there that said an increasing number of college students support post-birth abortions. This is where I have very, very deep issues with modern Protestantism, Christianity, whatever. They have this idea that you should just wait around and wait for God's plan to unfold. Basically making it excuses for their moral laziness. Jesus Christ had no problems with using violence. And that's all I'll say about it. Nameless Ask FM questions time. The Ask FM link is in the description below, below the cut, after the cut, whatever you want to call it. So if you don't want a name attached to it, you could send it there, but email is the best way to get to me, commonfilth@commonfilth.com. So here's one of those nameless questions. Common Filth, what's your take on the beta male mentality of not wanting to grow up and be a masculine man? Like that whole movement of manginas who don't want to be told to man up or be a man because it requires them to take initiative and not just be a useless deadweight in a situation. Yeah, I mean, I've heard the whole be a man thing and man up, but it's usually said by a woman who is telling some man to do some shit that he probably shouldn't be doing in the first place. There's the video by the Manhood Academy, the history of feminism as told by women, where you see this commercial with this black lady who's all man up and saying it all the time, and the video says, okay, show me how, and obviously they have no answer for it because they are not men. Like I said earlier, if you want to man up or be more masculine, you explore, you create, you conquer. And I think I just came up with that a few minutes ago. And I think I'm going to have to write an article about that and submit it somewhere before somebody else steals that idea. Even though it's not really a new idea, if you just generalize large parts of history, that's one commonality you will find. I mean, well, 3 commonalities, but you get the point. I don't see it too much in my daily business, in my daily life, that I see men who are openly hostile to the idea of masculinity. It's just that they're lost. They don't know where to go with it. They know that what they aren't doing is necessarily masculine, but they don't have any counterpoint. They don't have anybody telling them, they don't have any guidance. true guidance, somebody who's actually accomplished something, somebody who is a man. I think a good start for those people is just be direct in your dealings. Don't try to sugarcoat it when you want something done and when something's wrong. I mean, there's a way to be courteous, don't get me wrong, but don't act like the mistake being made is some positive thing. I think directness and bluntness is a masculine trait that should be exercised more freely, should be displayed more freely, because that's about the easiest thing you can do. Once you start doing that, you'll see a change in yourself. I mean, you can't do something without becoming it if you repeat it enough times. There is a beauty in the simplicity of knowing what there is to be done and letting somebody know if something is wrong, if something is not done correctly. Changes in attitude don't happen overnight, but there are little steps that you can take in order to become more masculine, and I think that is the most immediate thing you can possibly do as a man who is seeking to become more like a man. Next question. Lots of questions about masculinity, and this one has to do with it. Do you think that not only is the female gender role not properly fulfilled as well as the male gender role? For example, in Australia, able-bodied men sit on welfare because it is more than enough to support themselves. Yeah, I think I've been fair in my criticisms of both males and females. Everyone wants us to be androgynous. The powers that be want us to be interchangeable and very similar to each other, because differences mean you have to exclude somebody by virtue of who they are. The reason I think this is the case is because global capitalism is reaching this carrying capacity where they need to exploit these very small percentages of people. And that is getting increasingly difficult to do because they're running out of people to market to and to cater to. So the next thing that they can do, or they're attempting to do, is making men and women similar. If everyone has the same wants, same needs, same desires, companies can more efficiently market a given product. In fact, it's the greatest efficiency if everybody is the same. Sales go up a significant percentage, more significant than before, and the shareholders reward the company with increased stock prices. Multiculturalism, the blending of all peoples and the blending of all sexual identities, is the greatest act of consumerism, the final act of global capitalism and consumerism. Welfare certainly plays into this scheme because it promotes, as I've repeated before on several episodes, dysgenic breeding. Dysgenics creates more feminine men and more masculine women. But even just on the immediate level, yes, welfare does encourage people, man or woman, to sit around and do nothing. Society incentivizes failure, which was a title of a recent Stefan Molyneux video, which I have yet to listen to. And welfare isn't just a free handout. I mean, we should start thinking of welfare as certain jobs the government offers to its citizens, not in terms of military or law enforcement or anything of that sort, because they provide a necessary service that is essential to maintaining the nation. But I'm talking about large agencies of the government which do nothing but obstruct unnecessarily. You know, in America, we have Department of Motor Vehicles in any given state, and you will never see a more worthless set of people working in any given place than at a DMV. These workers do not work in tire shops. They do not work as mechanics. They do not work in factories creating anything. They simply exist to siphon your money unnecessarily. They get fat off of your charity. They get fat off of, gotta renew your license this year. That'll cost you X amount of dollars. I also think that school teachers are no different than this. I think teaching jobs should be reserved for people who have served in the military or are elderly people. But I think I talked enough about teachers last week, so I'll lay off. Okay, next question. What do you think about the feminist movement as a whole from its beginnings to present times? Do you think the movement accomplished anything? Do you think it was needed? And do you think it would be of great help for countries struggling with inequality against women? I am familiar with first wave feminism and I am familiar with third wave feminism, so those are the aspects of feminism that I will discuss. The first episode of the show that I did, and the first question, if I recall correctly, was about feminism. And my conclusion was that I do not like feminism because, and this is in reference to sex positive feminism, which is a part of third wave feminism, if I'm not mistaken. I do not like the fact that they take the inherently shameful behavior of sexual promiscuity and want to make it shameless through societal pressures. And I also have a problem with sex negative feminism because it wants to make every display of female sexuality seem like it's an objectification by the patriarchy when that's simply just not the case. Some women choose to put themselves out as sexual objects because it is beneficial for them in some way. I'm not saying this is morally correct, but that is simply what it is. I've seen many Tumblr feminists bitch about how men don't want women to have agency, but it seems that women don't want women to have agency, and that every decision a woman makes that they don't like is somehow them under the influence of some man or the patriarchy. The arguments that the factions of current feminism make are quite silly, laughable, and contradictory. And that's why we laugh at these things when we are presented with them. Genuine statements of whatever from feminists. It's almost like they're satire, but it's made even funnier because these things are sincere. Current feminism is a joke, but it is a very dangerous joke because they want to imprison men for saying things they don't like. And they want to put women into re-education camps that when women say things they don't like. First wave feminism is an interesting thing to talk about because you can't talk about it without talking about the failure of universal suffrage, which we are seeing in real time, unfolding in real time in America. Even though every loopy liberal idea that has ever been conceived has been passed since the women have had the right to vote, this isn't so much about women having to vote, my opposition towards first wave feminism, as it is about the opposition of everybody having the right to vote. America, in retrospect, should have limited voting rights to those who own land. That's it. If you own land, you're paying taxes on that land, you have a stake in the game. But if you're just some person who doesn't own land, who doesn't own a piece of the nation, you shouldn't be listened to because you have nothing worth saying. You have no sense of preservation. You have no sense of duty towards something greater than yourself. No one should have the right to vote simply because they exist and they exist at a certain age. They are above a certain age. As I've said in a previous episode, I don't care if women want the right to own land. If that's all feminism was, then fine, have it. But there's clearly something more perverse going on within it, and as we see now, it is spiraled out of control into something that is just a complete mockery. But to be fair, most things are a mockery now, and feminism is not an exclusive member of the everything is getting worse club. The part of this question that I find most interesting is the bit about do I think that it could help countries that have an extreme inequality with regard to women. No, feminism has been about either voting rights, working rights, and right to free birth control, or a right to be not objectified. Not one of these aspects of feminism has an answer for the basic fundamental treatment of human beings. And I think in the countries that treat women most cruelly, feminism wouldn't have an answer because it doesn't account for basic human savagery. All these waves of feminism assume that there are already power structures and institutions in place, that there are already rules in place. But in places with female circumcision and other horrible, horrible forms of abuse, there are none of these lawful institutions. There is no form of civilization, what we would call civilization. Even on a basic universal level, feminism is a failure. It is a failure no matter how you look at it. I would like to explore second wave feminism a bit more because I was overhearing something stupid on TV about how when baby formula hit the market, feminists liked it because it was women's liberation in a bottle. We don't have to breastfeed our children anymore. This bottle of formula can feed our children. I mean, we don't produce milk naturally for anything. No, boobs are just for fun. It's not for feeding our kids or anything. Finally, we can go work our stupid office job. Just such decadence and such shameful, shameful behavior that you do not want to feed your child what it needs, the nutrients that it cannot get from anywhere else. I can't have this kid sucking on my boobs. That takes up too much time. I gotta go do more important things like shuffles papers. Oh, I'm real busy. Yeah, bullshit. All right, that does it for the questions this weekend. Unless I can think of something else to talk about in the next 20 seconds, I'm just about done. So I'll give it a beat and I'll let you know. I'm done. I have nothing to talk about. I'm very tired. It's very late right now. So thank you for listening, though. I enjoy doing this greatly. If you'd like to hear your questions heard on this show, send me an email at commonfilth@commonfilth.com, or you can check the descriptions below and you could send me a question on Ask FM. That's becoming a go-to for me along with the email. So thank you so much. I will see you guys next week and take care of yourselves.